It was the shot that changed everything. One bullet, one kill, and the terrifying silence that followed. The M1903 Springfield wasn't the fastest rifle of World War II. It wasn't semi-automatic like the M1 Garand. It didn't spray bullets like the Thompson submachine gun. But when an American sniper looked through that scope, when his finger touched that trigger, SS soldiers knew their time had run out. The Springfield was a hunter's weapon, patient, precise, and absolutely unforgiving. With a telescopic sight mounted on top and a .30-06 cartridge chambering deadly accuracy at over 800 yards, it turned ordinary soldiers into invisible executioners. And to the German soldiers, especially the elite Waffen-SS units who thought themselves invincible, the Springfield sniper was the nightmare they couldn't shake. So how did a bolt-action rifle from 1903 become the most feared precision weapon of World War II? Why did SS commanders warn their men about the American sharpshooters more than they warned them about tanks or artillery? In this video, we'll uncover the full truth about the M1903 Springfield, how it was perfected for sniping, how American marksmen were trained to become silent killers, and why even today, veterans speak of it with the same reverence as a sacred relic. What you're about to hear is the story of the rifle that didn't need to fire twice. One shot, one kill. And the psychological terror that came with knowing an American sniper was out there, watching, waiting, and never missing. The story of the M1903 Springfield doesn't begin in World War II. It begins in humiliation and determination. In 1898, during the Spanish-American War, American soldiers found themselves outgunned. Spanish troops wielded German Mauser rifles, weapons that were faster to reload, more accurate, and far superior to anything the United States had. American casualties mounted, and the military brass knew something had to change. The answer came from the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. Engineers studied the Mauser design carefully, noting its controlled feed bolt action, its magazine system, and its precision machining. They took the best elements and improved on them. In 1903, the result was unveiled. The United States rifle, caliber .30-06, model 1903, the Springfield. It was a bolt-action rifle, 5 rounds fed from an internal magazine. The original chambering was .30-03, but by 1906, the military upgraded to the .30-06 Springfield cartridge, a round that would become legendary in its own right. The .30-06 was powerful, accurate, and versatile. It could drop a man at 1,000 yards or punch through light armor, and in the hands of a skilled shooter, it was devastatingly effective. The Springfield quickly became the standard infantry rifle for the U.S. Army. It was reliable, durable, and remarkably accurate for a mass-produced weapon. Soldiers who carried it in World War I praised its stopping power and its ability to function in the muddy hell of trench warfare. American doughboys firing Springfields from trenches in France became legendary for their marksmanship, often outperforming their Allied counterparts in shooting competitions and actual combat. But even then, a select few recognized that the Springfield had a higher calling. It wasn't just an infantry rifle, it was a precision instrument. Military marksmanship programs began experimenting with scopes. They mounted early telescopic sights on Springfields and tested them at extended ranges. The results were impressive. A good shooter with iron sights could hit targets at 600 yards. With a scope, that range doubled and accuracy improved dramatically. The rifle itself was beautifully designed for accuracy. The barrel was precisely machined and carefully rifled to stabilize the bullet. Each groove in the rifling was cut to exact specifications, ensuring that every bullet spun at the optimal rate for stability. The action was smooth, with minimal play or wobble. When you worked the bolt, it moved like silk, chambering rounds with mechanical precision that inspired confidence. The trigger, when properly adjusted by an armorer, broke cleanly at around 4 to 5 pounds of pressure. This allowed for precise shot placement without the heavy pull that could throw off aim. Experienced shooters described the Springfield's trigger as having a glass break, meaning it released suddenly and cleanly without creeping or staging. By the 1920s and 1930s, the concept of the military sniper was taking shape, and the Springfield was in the center of it. The U.S. Marine Corps in particular took marksmanship seriously. Marine recruits spent weeks on the rifle range, learning the fundamentals of shooting. The best shooters were identified early and given additional training. Some would eventually become scout snipers, the elite marksmen of the Corps. When World War II broke out, the U.S. military faced a dilemma. They had adopted the M1 Garand as the new standard infantry rifle, a semi-automatic weapon that gave American soldiers a significant firepower advantage. The Garand could fire 8 rounds as fast as you could pull the trigger, a revolutionary capability that changed infantry tactics. But the Garand, for all its strengths, wasn't ideal for precision shooting at extreme ranges. The semi-automatic action of the Garand introduced more variables into each shot. The gas system that automatically chambered the next round caused vibration. The moving parts created inconsistencies. For general infantry work at ranges under 400 yards, these factors were negligible. But for precision shooting at 600, 800, or 1,000 yards, they mattered. For sniping, the military needed something different. They needed the Springfield. The Marine Corps in particular recognized this. They kept the Springfield in service specifically for sniper use, equipping it with the best optics available. The Unertl 8X scope became the preferred choice for Marine snipers. It was a high-quality, externally adjusted scope with excellent clarity and precision. The Unertl was mounted on special bases that allowed it to slide backward during recoil, then return to battery, a system that enhanced durability and maintained zero after thousands of rounds. Some Army snipers used the Weaver 330C, a 2.5x scope that was simpler but still effective. The lower magnification made it faster to acquire targets at closer ranges, which was useful in the European theater where engagement distances were often shorter than in the Pacific. A few units experimented with other optics, but the Unertl and Weaver became the standard choices. The Springfield weighed about 9 pounds with a scope, light enough to carry on long missions, but heavy enough to absorb recoil and stay steady during the shot. The weight distribution was nearly perfect for prone shooting, the most common sniping position. When you settled behind the rifle, everything felt balanced and stable. Its overall length was 43 inches, slightly longer than some rifles, but for a sniper in a fixed position, that extra length translated to better accuracy and higher muzzle velocity. The longer barrel allowed the powder to burn completely, extracting maximum energy from each cartridge and producing more consistent velocities from shot to shot. The .30-06 cartridge it fired was one of the most powerful rifle rounds in common use during World War II. The standard military load pushed a 15-grain bullet at around 2,700 feet per second from the Springfield's 24-inch barrel. That gave it a relatively flat trajectory, meaning less adjustment needed for elevation at moderate ranges. At 300 yards, the bullet would drop only about 7 inches below the line of sight. At 600 yards, the drop increased to 60 inches, but with proper training and a good scope, this was entirely manageable. The bullet carried enough energy to remain lethal well beyond 1,000 yards. It could penetrate steel helmets at any combat range. It would punch through sandbags, wooden walls, and light cover as if they weren't there. When it hit flesh and bone, the results were catastrophic. The 150-grain bullet traveling at high velocity created massive wound channels and transferred tremendous energy to the target. Soldiers hit by Springfield rounds rarely survived, even with medical treatment. But the rifle was only part of the equation. The other part was far more complex: the human being behind it. Because the M1903 Springfield didn't make you a sniper. It simply gave you the tool. What made you a sniper was training, discipline, patience, and the willingness to kill with cold, methodical precision. And that training was about to become some of the most demanding in the entire U.S. military. When American forces engaged in combat during World War II, The Springfield sniper rifle quickly proved its worth across every theater of operation. In North Africa, Italy, France, and the Pacific, American snipers with Springfields became a constant, terrifying threat that Axis forces could never fully counter. The rifle's accuracy, range, and stopping power made it the perfect tool for picking off high-value targets and spreading fear through enemy ranks. In North Africa, during the campaigns in Tunisia in 1942 and 1943, American snipers supported infantry advances by eliminating German machine gun positions and observation posts. The open desert terrain was ideal for long-range shooting when snipers could find elevated positions. From ridges and rocky outcrops, they could observe enemy positions for miles and engage targets at ranges that seemed impossible to their opponents. One Marine Corps sniper operating with Army units in Tunisia recalled engaging German soldiers at 900 yards, distances at which the enemy didn't even realize they were under fire at first. The crack of the Springfield from that distance was barely audible over the ambient noise of the battlefield. German soldiers would simply drop, shot through the chest or head, while their comrades looked around in confusion, trying to determine where the shot had come from. The Germans had their own snipers, of course. Many were veterans of the Eastern Front, where they'd honed their skills against Soviet forces in brutal urban combat. But the German snipers primarily used the Kar-98K with a ZF-41 or ZF-42 scope. Weapons that were effective but not quite in the same class as the Springfield with its Unertel optic. The German scopes typically offered only 4x magnification, compared to the American 8x, giving American snipers a significant advantage in target identification and engagement at extreme ranges. In Italy, the fighting shifted to different terrain, mountainous and urban, with shorter engagement distances but more complex tactical situations. American snipers adapted their techniques to the environment. In the ruins of Cassino, snipers positioned themselves in bombed-out buildings, firing through carefully selected holes in walls, using the urban rubble for concealment and cover. The fighting for Monte Cassino in early 1944 saw some of the most intense sniper activity of the Italian campaign. Both sides employed snipers extensively, and veteran soldiers learned to move with extreme caution. One American infantryman later wrote in his memoir that crossing an open street in Cassino was like playing Russian roulette. You never knew if a sniper had that particular spot covered. You just moved fast, kept low, and prayed. But the American snipers gave as good as they got, and often better. One Army sniper recorded 23 confirmed kills during the Cassino fighting, most of them German soldiers who made the mistake of silhouetting themselves against the sky or exposing themselves in windows. His method was patient and systematic. He would study a sector of the German-held ruins through his scope for hours, memorizing every window, every pile of rubble, every position where a defender might be concealed. Then he waited for movement. When a target appeared, he didn't rush the shot. He observed first, confirming it was a worthwhile target and not just a soldier moving between positions. If it was an officer giving orders, or a machine gunner setting up his weapon, or a radio operator with his telltale antenna, then the shot was worth taking. He would settle the crosshairs, check his breathing, verify the wind, and squeeze the trigger. More often than not, the target dropped, killed before he even heard the shot that ended his life. At Anzio, where Allied forces were pinned in a narrow beachhead for months, snipers on both sides dominated no man's land. Any movement during daylight drew fire. Supply parties had to move at night. Soldiers learned to relieve themselves in their foxholes rather than risk moving to latrines. The German artillery observers on the surrounding hills had perfect fields of observation, and any visible activity would bring down artillery fire within minutes. American snipers at Anzio targeted those German observers relentlessly. Positioned in carefully concealed hides within the Allied perimeter, they would scan the hills with their scopes, looking for the telltale glint of German optics or the slight movement that betrayed an observer's position.
When they found one, they took the shot. Sometimes it took multiple tries to hit targets at 700 or 800 yards on the hillsides, but American snipers had the ammunition to expend on such targets, and they considered it ammunition well spent. Each German observer killed meant less accurate artillery fire on American positions. One particularly deadly exchange at Anzio involved an American sniper and a German counterpart who had been trading shots for several days. The German had killed 3 American soldiers who had carelessly exposed themselves. The American sniper made it his mission to eliminate this threat. For 3 days, he studied the area where he believed the German was operating, looking for any clue to his exact position. Finally, on the 4th day, he caught a glimpse of movement in a pile of rubble. He fired immediately. The movement stopped. Later reconnaissance confirmed the kill. A German sniper with 17 notches carved in his rifle stock, 1 for each claimed kill. The psychological impact of snipers at Anzio was profound. Soldiers on both sides lived in constant fear of the unseen marksman who might end their lives at any moment. This fear restricted movement, disrupted operations, and lowered morale. Commanders had to factor sniper threat into every tactical decision. Simple tasks like bringing forward ammunition or evacuating wounded became complex operations requiring covering fire, smoke screens, and careful timing. But it was in the Pacific Theater where the Springfield truly established its fearsome reputation. On islands from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, Marine snipers used the Springfield to devastating effect against Japanese forces. The dense jungle terrain and Japanese defensive tactics made the Pacific an entirely different war from Europe, and snipers had to adapt their techniques accordingly. On Guadalcanal in 1942, Marine snipers first encountered Japanese snipers who used different tactics than their German counterparts. Japanese snipers would tie themselves into trees, creating elevated positions with excellent fields of fire. They were extraordinarily patient, sometimes remaining in position for days, waiting for valuable targets. They would allow entire patrols to pass beneath them, then shoot officers or radio operators from behind. Marine snipers learned to counter these tactics by carefully scanning tree canopies before advancing. They looked for unnatural shapes, for rope or cloth that didn't belong, for any hint of a concealed position. When they spotted a Japanese sniper, they engaged immediately and didn't stop shooting until they were certain the threat was eliminated. The Springfield's power was especially valuable in this role because it could punch through tree branches and still retain enough energy to kill the sniper behind them.
By the time Allied forces landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944, American snipers with Springfield rifles had become a critical part of military strategy, and their primary targets were clear: officers, machine gunners, radio operators, medics when tactically necessary, and anyone wearing the distinctive insignia of the Waffen-SS. The SS were Hitler's elite military force. They were better trained, better equipped, and far more fanatical than regular Wehrmacht troops. They fought harder, held positions longer, and inflicted significantly more casualties on Allied forces than equivalent-sized Wehrmacht units. For American commanders pushing inland from the Normandy beaches, eliminating SS leadership and key personnel became a top priority, and the Springfield sniper was the perfect tool for that mission. In the hedgerows of Normandy, the war became a deadly game of cat and mouse played out in a nightmarish landscape. The bocage country, with its thick hedges growing on earthen banks, sunken roads, and small fields, created perfect sniper terrain. Each field was surrounded by hedges that had been growing for centuries, some reaching 15 feet high and 6 feet thick at the base. Advancing through this terrain was like fighting through a maze where the enemy could be waiting around every corner. American snipers would set up in elevated positions when possible, using the height advantage to see over hedges and spot enemy movement. Sometimes they climbed trees, though this was dangerous because it limited escape routes if discovered. More often, they found positions on the second floor of farmhouses or barns, shooting through carefully selected windows or holes in walls that provided concealment while offering clear fields of fire. One Marine sniper operating with Army units in Normandy described his typical day. We'd move into a position before dawn, usually an abandoned farmhouse or a position in the hedgerows where we could see multiple fields. My spotter would set up with binoculars while I got the rifle ready. Then we'd wait, sometimes for hours. The Germans were smart. They knew we were out there, so they moved carefully. But eventually, someone would make a mistake. An officer would stand up to get a better view. A machine gunner would shift his position. When that happened, we'd take the shot. The SS units moving through the hedgerows quickly learned that every open space was a potential kill zone. Veterans of the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, one of the most fanatical units in the German military, later described their fear of American snipers in Normandy. One SS veteran recalled, "You couldn't see them. You'd be moving through the bocage, thinking you were safe behind the hedges, and then crack. One of your comrades would drop. Sometimes you'd hear the shot, sometimes you wouldn't. We tried to locate the shooter, but by the time we looked, he was gone, or so well concealed we couldn't spot him. It was like fighting ghosts." American snipers were trained to shoot and relocate. After firing, they would carefully withdraw from their position, moving slowly and methodically to avoid detection. They might move 50 or 100 yards to a completely different position, then set up and wait again. This tactic, known as shoot and scoot, made it nearly impossible for the Germans to counterattack effectively. By the time German forces organized a response to the sniper's position, he was already somewhere else. The psychological impact on SS troops was severe, and that's saying something. These were men who had fought on the Eastern Front, who had survived brutal combat against the Soviets in places like Kursk and Kharkov. They weren't easily intimidated. They had faced T-34 tanks, Soviet artillery barrages, and human wave attacks. But the American snipers got under their skin in a way that conventional threats didn't. The randomness of it was part of what made it so terrifying. You could be the best soldier in your unit, the most experienced, the bravest, but if a sniper had you in his crosshairs, none of that mattered. 1 second you're alive, the next you're dead. Killed by a man you never saw from a distance you couldn't return fire from. There was no glory in it, no chance to fight back, just sudden, unexpected death. One captured SS officer interrogated by American intelligence in July 1944 admitted that the American snipers were one of the only things he truly feared. Not your tanks, not your artillery, not even your air superiority. The snipers. Because you can take cover from tanks and artillery. You can dig in and survive. But the snipers, you never know where they are. You never know when one is watching you through his scope. That uncertainty, that constant fear, it destroys morale in a way that nothing else does. American snipers also deliberately targeted specific high-value individuals. German officers were prime targets because eliminating them could disrupt entire operations. A company commander killed at a critical moment could leave his unit leaderless and confused. A battalion commander eliminated during an attack could cause the entire operation to falter. Snipers learned to identify officers by their behavior and equipment. Officers carried maps and binoculars. They stood differently, with more confidence. They gave orders and other soldiers responded to them. A trained observer could spot an officer within seconds of watching a German position. Once identified, that officer was marked for death. One Army sniper in France kept a journal where he recorded his kills. Entry after entry detailed German officers eliminated. July 15th, SS Hauptsturmfeuer, approximately 450 yards, chest shot. Subject was directing troops near Carentan. Confirmed kill. July 18th, Wehrmacht Oberleutnant, approximately 620 yards, headshot. Subject was observing our positions with binoculars. Confirmed kill. The clinical descriptions masked the reality that each entry represented a man's life ended by a single precisely placed bullet. Radio operators were also high-priority targets. German forces relied heavily on radio communication to coordinate their defensive operations. A radio operator could be identified by his antenna, by the backpack radio he carried, by the way he stayed close to officers to receive and transmit messages. Killing a radio operator could cut off a unit's communication at a critical moment, leaving them unable to call for support or receive orders. Machine gunners were targeted to silence the devastating fire of the MG-42, the German machine gun that could fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute. The MG-42 was one of the most feared weapons on the battlefield, capable of cutting down entire squads in seconds. But the machine gun required a crew to operate, and the gunner himself was vulnerable to sniper fire. When advancing American infantry were pinned down by an MG-42, snipers would locate the position and eliminate the gunner, often killing the assistant gunner when he tried to take over the weapon. The targeting of medics was controversial and remains so to this day. The Geneva Conventions protected medical personnel, and both sides generally respected that protection. German medics wore Red Cross armbands, and American medics wore Red Cross markings on their helmets. Under the rules of war, they were not supposed to be targeted.
But the reality of combat was more complex than the rules suggested. Some American commanders argued that in total war, especially against an enemy as brutal as the SS, no target was off limits. They pointed out that German medics kept enemy soldiers alive to fight again, making them legitimate targets. Some snipers refused to shoot medics on principle, believing it violated the code of warfare. Others shot medics without hesitation, viewing them as enemy combatants contributing to the war effort. One sniper later reflected on this moral complexity. "I shot a German medic once. Just once. He was treating wounded SS troops who'd been hit in one of our artillery strikes. I watched him through my scope for maybe 10 minutes, wrestling with the decision. Part of me said he was just doing his job, helping wounded men, no different from our medics. But another part said those wounded men he was treating would be back fighting us in a few weeks if they survived. I took the shot. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. War doesn't allow for moral purity. You make hard choices and live with them." The effectiveness of Springfield snipers in Normandy was undeniable and measurable. After the Battle of Saint-Lô in July 1944, American intelligence analyzed German casualties and found that a disproportionate number of officers and NCOs had been killed compared to regular soldiers. This wasn't random. It was the result of systematic targeting by American snipers who were eliminating leadership at every opportunity. In the push toward Paris in August 1944, snipers cleared the way for advancing infantry by eliminating machine gun nests and observation posts. One particularly effective operation involved a sniper team that eliminated 7 German observers positioned in a church steeple outside the town of Vire. The Germans had been using the steeple to direct artillery fire on American positions with devastating accuracy. The sniper, positioned about 600 yards away, systematically shot each observer as he appeared in the steeple windows. After the 7th kill, no more observers appeared, and American artillery subsequently destroyed the steeple with direct fire. But perhaps the most psychologically effective use of snipers came during the static phases of the campaign, when front lines stabilized for days or weeks. During these periods, snipers made life miserable for German troops in forward positions. Any movement during daylight drew fire. Ration parties had to move at night. Soldiers learned to stay low in their foxholes and trenches. The constant threat of the sniper's bullet created a pervasive sense of vulnerability that wore down morale over time. One Wehrmacht soldier, captured in September 1944, described the psychological toll. "We called them Waldgeister, forest ghosts. You never saw them, never heard them until it was too late. Every morning we'd wake up and someone would be dead, shot during the night or at dawn. We started drawing lots to see who would have to move during daylight to get water or food. Nobody wanted to move. Some men preferred to go thirsty rather than risk exposing themselves. That's not cowardice, that's rational fear. Those American snipers were death incarnate." SS units tried various countermeasures. They positioned their own snipers to hunt the American marksmen. They used artillery fire to suppress suspected sniper positions. They employed smoke screens to obscure visibility during movement. They enforced strict discipline about movement and exposure.
Some units went so far as to court-martial soldiers who carelessly exposed themselves, arguing that such behavior endangered the entire unit by revealing their positions. But none of these countermeasures fully solved the problem. American snipers were too well trained, too well equipped, and too numerous. By late 1944, most American divisions had sniper sections, and these snipers were constantly rotating through frontline positions, ensuring that there was always someone watching the German lines through a telescopic sight mounted on a Springfield rifle. The Battle of Hurtgen Forest in autumn 1944 presented unique challenges for snipers on both sides. The dense forest and limited visibility made long-range shooting nearly impossible. Engagement distances dropped to 200 yards or less. But even in these conditions, snipers found ways to be effective. They positioned themselves overlooking forest trails and clearings where German troops had to move. They targeted officers and radio operators during the confused fighting in the woods. They provided overwatch for infantry patrols, ready to engage any German forces that appeared. One sniper operating in the Hurtgen Forest described the eerie atmosphere. The forest was like a green hell. Trees so thick you couldn't see 50 feet. Every shadow could hide a German. We'd move to a position and just wait, watching through the scope for any movement. Sometimes you'd see a shape moving through the trees. You had to decide in a split second if it was German or American. Get it wrong either way and someone died or shouldn't. The pressure was incredible. But when you did spot a German, when you had a clear shot, you took it without hesitation. In that forest, hesitation meant death.
The M1903 Springfield rifle remained in service long after World War II ended. It fought again in Korea from 1950 to 1953, where Marine snipers used it with devastating effectiveness in the frozen hills and valleys of that bitter conflict. Chinese and North Korean soldiers faced the same lethal precision that German and Japanese forces had encountered in World War II. One Marine sniper in Korea, Sergeant Hathcock's mentor, recorded 93 confirmed kills with his Springfield during the war, proving that the old rifle was still the equal of any sniper weapon in the world. Even in the early years of the Vietnam War, some American snipers preferred the Springfield over newer rifles. They trusted its accuracy, its reliability, and its proven combat record. The rifle didn't officially retire from frontline sniper service until the mid-1960s, when it was finally replaced by the M14 and later specialized sniper rifles. By then, the Springfield had served as America's primary sniper rifle for over 50 years, a remarkable testament to the soundness of its design. Today, the M1903 Springfield is considered a historical treasure. Museums display them with honor. Collectors pay premium prices for original sniper-configured Springfields with their Unertl or Weaver scopes. The rifle appears in countless films and books about World War II, always portrayed as the weapon of choice for the skilled marksman, the patient hunter, the invisible killer. The Springfield was the tool, the American sniper was the weapon, and together they were unstoppable.